Hello everyone, and welcome back to Stone to Moon, the channel where we dig up the buried secrets of the ancient Philippines. Today we are going to expose a part of history that was intentionally destroyed. We are traveling back to the critical year of 1521. Imagine the scene: Spanish conquistadors, armored in steel, step onto the white sands of the Philippine Islands. They arrived expecting to find simple, disorganized tribes that would easily crumble before their swords and their crosses. But instead, they found something that shook them to their core. They encountered a power so intimidating that the Spanish Empire would spend the next 3 centuries trying to wipe it from the collective memory of the world. They found a warrior queen. This was a woman who led an army of 10,000 elite soldiers. She ruled a kingdom so wealthy that it controlled the flow of trade between China, India, and Arabia. She was so formidable that even the greatest traveler of the medieval world, Ibn Battuta, wrote about her with trembling respect. Her name was Princess Urduja. And if the colonizers had their way, you would never know she breathed the same air as us. Today, we are unearthing one of the most massive cover-ups in human history. This is a story hidden beneath layers of colonial lies and propaganda. It is a mystery that modern archaeology is finally solving. The truth is simple but revolutionary. The Philippines was not a primitive land waiting to be discovered. It was a thriving, advanced civilization. And at the heart of this civilization stood a woman who terrified the European invaders. This is the true story of the queen they tried to delete, the army they feared, and the undeniable evidence that is bringing her back from the dead. Let's begin with a riddle that historians have ignored for too long. We know the names of the men Spain conquered: Montezuma of the Aztecs, Atahualpa of the Incas. Their names are in every textbook. But why is there almost zero mention of the most powerful female ruler in the pre-colonial Philippines? The answer is dark, and it reveals how history is used as a weapon. Back in 1345, the Moroccan explorer Ibn Battuta was chronicling his journey through Asia. In his famous journals, he described a land called Tawalisi. He wrote of a ruler who defied all expectations, a warrior princess named Urduja. He didn't describe a passive royal. He described a general. He documented her 10,000 troops, her massive navy of war junks, and her legendary challenge: she vowed never to marry any man unless he could beat her in a duel to the death. For hundreds of years, Western scholars laughed this off. They called it a sailor's fairy tale. But the story takes a sinister turn when the Spanish arrived 176 years later. In their private letters and diaries, documents that were never meant to be read by the public, the Spanish chroniclers recorded something shocking. Hidden away in dusty archives for 4 centuries, these papers describe meetings with powerful female chieftains. They speak of women who led armies, managed trade networks spanning the ocean, and ruled from fortified cities that were as impressive as anything in Europe. And yet, in the official history books published by Spain, silence. Absolute emptiness. It was as if these women had been erased from existence. But you cannot hide the truth forever. In 2003, the silence was finally broken. Dr. Laura Lee Juna, a Filipino archaeologist, made a discovery in Pangasinan province that turned the history books upside down. She was digging in ancient burial grounds, expecting to find ordinary remains. Instead, she uncovered the impossible. She found the skeletons of warriors, but they were women. Dozens of them. These weren't peasant women. They were buried with the honors of supreme commanders. They were surrounded by weapons of war, heavy gold jewelry, and expensive trade goods from China, Vietnam, and India. These women were not myths. They were flesh and blood rulers, and they were buried with the respect of queens. To really understand who Urduja was, we have to destroy the false image of the primitive native that schools taught us. That image is a lie manufactured by colonizers. The pre-colonial Philippines was actually a glittering, sophisticated world. By the 14th century, these islands were the engine of Asian maritime trade. You would see Chinese ships unloading silk, Indian vessels bringing spices, and Arab merchants trading glass. And Filipino ships were right there with them, exporting gold, pearls, and hardwoods. The barangay kingdoms were not tiny villages, they were complex nations with strict social hierarchies, their own writing systems, and advanced metal working technology. But the thing that made the Philippines truly unique, and the thing that terrified the Spanish missionaries, was the status of women. Unlike in Europe, where women were seen as property, Filipino women held immense power. They could own land, run international businesses, serve as spiritual leaders, and lead troops into battle. This was normal life. Even the Spanish writer Miguel de Lorca admitted in 1582 with surprise, "These native women enjoy much more freedom than women in Spain. They can inherit property, choose their own husbands, and even rule as chiefs." Princess Urduja was the ultimate example of this power. According to Ibn Battuta, she ruled Tawalisi, which modern scholars place in Pangasinan or the Cagayan Valley. She controlled the shipping lanes. Her soldiers were trained from birth. And her refusal to marry wasn't about romance. It was a brilliant political move. By staying single, she ensured no husband could steal her throne. She was a sovereign queen in every sense of the word. Now, let's look at the hard proof that Spain tried to hide. In the late 90s and early 2000s, excavations all over Luzon started revealing a pattern of a militaristic society run by women. Dr. Juna's sites in Pangasinan showed that in the 14th and 15th centuries, the richest and most weapon-filled graves belonged to females. The skeletons with healed combat wounds. They were women. But if this was the reality, why did the Spanish pretend it wasn't? We found the smoking gun in the records of the Spanish Inquisition. In 1618, authorities in Manila put a woman named Maria Ladia on trial for witchcraft. But when you read the court transcripts, the truth comes out. Maria Ladia wasn't a witch. She was a Babaylan, a spiritual general. Her magic was blessing the warriors before war. Her crime was refusing to bow to the Spanish king. In her defense, she told the court that she was a descendant of the ancient warrior queens. She spoke of her grandmother's stories about a princess who commanded 10,000 soldiers and answered to no man. The Spanish burned her at the stake. They thought that by burning her, they were burning the memory of Urduja. But they forgot that stone doesn't burn. In 2015, archaeologists near the Cagayan River found a massive fortress. It had walls, towers, and water systems, dated exactly to Urduja's time. Inside the main palace, they found the grave of a royal woman surrounded by foreign treasures. The evidence is screaming at us she was real. So why the cover-up? Why did Spain work so hard to delete her from history? The answer reveals the ugly truth of colonization. The conquistadors came with a worldview that men were superior and that they were bringing civilization to savages. The Philippines proved them wrong. One Spanish friar, Francisco Colin, wrote in 1663, "We found a people who exceeded many Christian nations in their treatment of women, who here enjoy liberties and respect unknown in our own kingdoms." This was a nightmare for the colonizers. If they admitted that Filipino women were freer and more powerful than Spanish women, their excuse for conquering the islands fell apart. How could they civilize a people who were already more advanced in human rights? The solution was brutal: erase everything. Spanish writers were ordered to leave out any mention of powerful women. Warrior queens were labeled as demons or monsters. The Doctrina Christiana of 1593 commanded Filipino women to submit to men, a concept that was foreign to their culture. The friars hunted the Babaylan to extinction. Ancient scripts were burned as devil's works. Children were brainwashed to believe their ancestors were weak. Within a few generations, Urduja faded into a myth. Within a century, she was forgotten. Colonization is not just about stealing land, it is about stealing memory. But today, the Queen is waking up. Filipino scholars and historians are taking back the narrative. In 2019, teams from the University of the Philippines found more fortresses along the Agno River, exactly where Tawalisi should be. New translations of ancient texts have found hidden references to female commanders. Even Ibn Battuta's travel maps have been verified by satellites to match the geography of Pangasinan. Some skeptics still say it's just a legend. But remember, they said the city of Troy was a myth until we dug it up. They said Vikings never reached America until we found their houses. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when the evidence was actively destroyed for 300 years. What is the lesson of Princess Urduja? First, history is written by the winners, but it is corrected by the archaeologists. The truth survives the fire. Second, when you are told a culture was backward, ask yourself, who benefits from that lie? Princess Urduja represents the terrifying truth that indigenous people didn't need saving. They were already free. That is why she had to be erased. But 500 years later, she is winning the war. Every time a shovel hits an artifact in Pangasinan, she wins. Every time a child learns that their ancestors were kings and queens, she wins. In Pangasinan today, a statue of Urduja stands looking out to sea. She holds a sword and shield, facing the west, facing the invaders. She was buried, but not forgotten. Erased, but not destroyed. They tried to write her out of existence, but history wrote her back in. The queen has returned.